A top U.S. general is in hot water. A report says he secretly called his Chinese counterpart twice. During those calls, he reportedly said he'd inform China should the U.S. decide to attack. Taiwan seems to be taking Beijing's aggression seriously. New military drills are gearing up for a specific scenario in the case China takes out the island's military airfields. 15 high-rises in China have now been blasted to pieces. The buildings had been sitting unfinished for over 8 years. And a Chinese Communist Party media mouthpiece officially labels U.S. billionaire investor Soros a terrorist. That's after Soros angered Beijing. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A top U.S. general is said to have secretly called his Chinese counterpart twice over concerns then President Trump could spark a war with China. This triggered strong reactions.
Several reports allege Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Mark Milley called a top general in China's People's Liberation Army. A spokesperson for Milley confirmed the general made 2 calls, one in 2020 and another in January, both under the Trump administration. Those calls were to reassure the Chinese military that the U.S. would not attack and that Milley would warn them if an attack were imminent. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said Biden was standing by Milley, even if the calls did happen.
I have great confidence in General Milley.
Milley's spokesperson said the general's calls with the Chinese were in line with his duties to convey reassurance and to maintain strategic stability. Yet some Republicans were outraged by the news. They said Milley broke the law by going behind the commander-in-chief's back to tell adversaries about U.S. policy. For example, Senator Rand Paul wrote in a statement, "I don't care what you think of President Trump. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff working to subvert the military chain of command and collude with China is exactly what we do not accept from military leaders in our country. He should be court-martialed if true." Though Pentagon spokesman John Kirby said Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has full confidence in General Milley and the job he's doing.
In a typical call, particularly with a nation like China, that would be a fully coordinated conversation, and there would be the sharing of information after the fact.
Prominent journalist Bob Woodward first reported on the calls in the upcoming book Peril. The New York Times reported that the book referenced U.S. intelligence before the 2020 election, which allegedly showed the Chinese thought former President Trump would attack them in a plot to secure his victory. But Trump called that fake news, saying he never thought of attacking China, and China knows that. Yet Trump says if Milley did really make the calls, he should be tried for treason for going behind his back. Former Lieutenant Colonel Alan West has a similar view. He compared Milley to Benedict Arnold if it's true, and cautioned that the upper echelons of the military may be politicized.
If this does pan out to be true, this is a major issue for the United States military, because you have the senior military officer in the United States of America, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, colluding with our #1 geopolitical foe. And not just that, but also having discussions about he would undermine the power of the commander-in-chief. He would have to step down and resign.
Several Republicans have called for Milley to be fired or resign if the allegations are true, and Milley is set to testify before Congress later this month on the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
According to the Washington Post report, General Milley called his Chinese counterpart to disclose to him that the U.S. would not attack China. He is quoted as saying, "General Lee, I want to assure you that the American government is stable and everything is going to be okay. We are not going to attack or conduct any kinetic operations against you." The second time he called the Chinese military, he reportedly told the general that he would inform him if the U.S. were to attack. The Post quotes him as saying, "General Lee, you and I have known each other for now 5 years. If we're going to attack, I am going to call you ahead of time. It's not going to be a surprise."
Retired Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, an outspoken Trump critic, is calling for Milley to resign.
I cannot imagine a situation in which the chairman of the Joint Chiefs offers to warn an adversary of an imminent attack. If the senior most military officer in the United States Army or in the United States military acted without any oversight, without any accountability, I find that deeply troubling. It's doing the what to me seems like the wrong thing for seemingly the right reason. There's not a way to get away with that.
The Vice Chairman of the U.S. Department of Defense's Joint Chiefs of Staff, John E. Hyten, said on Monday that the U.S.'s goal should be to never go to war with China, to never go to war with Russia. He said that day would be, quote, a horrible day for the planet and a horrible day for our countries. Taiwan is conducting military drills for a specific scenario that China has taken out the island's military airfields. This comes as China continues to ramp up military pressure against Taiwan and threats of possible invasion. On Wednesday, Taiwanese fighter jets practiced landing on a makeshift runway on a highway strip. Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen oversaw the exercise, demonstrating its importance. Tsai commented on the drills, saying such splendid combat skills and rapid and real actions come from solid everyday training and also demonstrate the confidence of the Republic of China Air Force in defending its airspace. The Republic of China is Taiwan's official name. The highway-turned airstrip was made to be particularly straight and flat. It's designed to be used as a runway in case enemy forces take out Taiwan's air bases. These week-long exercises are taking place all over Taiwan. Other drills include practicing maneuvers to repel a Chinese invasion, protect critical infrastructure, and night operations. China claims democratically ruled Taiwan as part of its own territory, and it has not ruled out using military force to take it over. Now we turn to China's neighbor, North Korea. North Korea fired a pair of ballistic missiles off its east coast on Wednesday, 2 days after it had tested a long-range cruise missile. Ryan Chang reports.
North Korea fired 2 ballistic missiles on Wednesday morning, just days after Pyongyang's previous launch. According to the South's military, the unidentified warheads landed in the sea to the east of the Korean peninsula. In a statement, the U.S. military's Indo-Pacific Command said the missile launch posed no immediate threat to U.S. personnel or allies. Over the weekend, Pyongyang carried out what it said were successful tests of a long-range cruise missile, a weapon with probable nuclear capabilities. North Korea's latest round of missiles came as nuclear envoys of South Korea, Japan, and the United States were meeting in Tokyo this week. It drew anger from Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga.
The launch of a possible ballistic missile threatens the peace and security of our country and the region and is outrageous.
The latest launch on Wednesday came just as China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi was in Seoul to discuss North Korea's earlier cruise missile test and the stalled denuclearization talks between Washington and Pyongyang. South Korean President Moon Jae-in had reportedly asked for China's help to restart dialogue with the North, which has been unresponsive to offers from the South or the US to talk or engage in humanitarian aid. Wang told reporters that not only North Korea but all parties should work in ways to resume dialogue and promote peace and stability on the Korean peninsula. The 2 ballistic missile tests are North Korea's first since March this year. Negotiations with former U.S. President Donald Trump to urge Kim Jong-un to dismantle his nuclear arsenal in return for U.S. sanctions relief have stalled since 2019.
On the same day as North Korea's missile tests, South Korea conducted submarine-launched ballistic missile tests. The test was successful, and South Korean President Moon Jae-in was in attendance. The missile was ejected from a newly commissioned submarine. Moon says that the test had already been planned and is not a response to North Korea's tests, although he points out that North Korea's nuclear capabilities is a reason for South Korea to develop better missiles. South Korea currently doesn't have nuclear weapons. China has officially declared billionaire investor George Soros a global terrorist, labeling him the son of Satan. That comes from a major Chinese Communist Party mouthpiece, the Global Times. The article is titled, "This Global Economic Terrorist is Staring at China." It accuses the Human Rights Watch funded by Soros's Open Society Foundations of intentionally spreading rumors about China. The Global Times commentary also claims that Soros has been funding Hong Kong's Jimmy Lai since 2019. He's the jailed owner of news outlet Apple Daily. Apple Daily closed its business in 2021 due to Beijing's clampdown. It was one of the best-selling pro-democracy newspapers in Hong Kong. The article says Soros conspired with Lai, trying to start an anti-communist movement in Hong Kong, what they call a color revolution. Hong Kong police arrested 5 Apple Daily executives in June, saying more than 30 articles from their media violated the national security law. The articles called for foreign sanctions against Beijing. Over $2 million in the newspaper's assets were frozen. Soros recently wrote a commentary in the Wall Street Journal speaking about BlackRock, a New York-based investment management corporation. He said its $1 billion investment in China was a tragic mistake. 15 high-rises in China are demolished at the same time. Prior to the blast, the buildings had been sitting unfinished for over 8 years. NTD's Juliet Song has the details.
One of the biggest demolitions to date in China. Real estate developers recently blew 15 buildings to bits using several tons of explosives. Within 45 seconds, over $150 million worth of property collapsed into dust. The site is located in Kunming, a city in southwestern China. The now leveled high-rises had been sitting unfinished for 8 years. Construction was halted several times due to a lack of capital and several ownership changes. The current developer believes the property could no longer meet market demand. Plus, there were safety issues because of rainwater damage to the building foundations. Developers now plan to build other types of housing in the same area. Unfinished construction projects are becoming more common across China. In some cases, these properties are abandoned even in wealthy city districts. Like this building in Shanghai. Its construction started in 1999, but came to a halt in the early 2000s. It remains empty to date. And in the port city of Tianjin, this skyscraper was supposed to become the tallest building in northern China. But developers abandoned the project in 2015 because of funding issues. In the south, the sprawling metropolis of Guangzhou City is no different. More than 160 buildings there have turned to ruins after developers failed to finish building it. And in northeast China, one major construction site has gone stagnant for 20 years. It had been earmarked to become Asia's biggest theme park. Juliet Song, NTD News.
In China, someone accused of murder has the right to defense from a lawyer, but people who practice the spiritual meditation system Falun Gong aren't allowed the same. At least, that's what one Chinese judge had to say on the issue. Let's look at a recording for more details.
A recording reveals a concerning comment from a court judge in China saying, even a murderer can defend himself, but Falun Gong practitioners cannot. A court in northeastern China's Dehui City, part of Jilin province, recently began a trial against a group of Falun Gong practitioners. That's because they refused to give up their spiritual beliefs and had been trying to expose the communist regime's persecution of the meditation practice. But lawyers were blocked from defending them in court. The Epoch Times Chinese language edition published a recording Friday capturing comments from Judge Wang Rongfu. In it, he's speaking to a family member of an accused Falun Gong practitioner. The following conversation took place at the end of last year. Judge Wang also claimed that lawyers who practice Falun Gong themselves aren't allowed to defend other practitioners. He added that if a lawyer wants to defend Falun Gong practitioners as innocent, he must get consent from the local judicial bureau, but then claimed getting that consent would be impossible. Wang also denied the Falun Gong practitioner's family member the right to standard judicial process. According to a report by a U.S.-based Falun Gong information website, minghui.org, 8 family members of Falun Gong practitioners sued Wang in July. In one case, where Wang served as the presiding judge, he failed to notify the relatives of those accused about the court session ahead of time. Because of that, the court deprived the family members of their legal observer rights and lawyers' defense rights.
A Chinese woman is planning an appeal after a Beijing court ruled against her in a high-profile sexual harassment case Tuesday. She is spearheading the country's metoo movement in recent years.
One of the biggest court cases of the metoo movement to hit China held another hearing on Tuesday. And the woman at the center of the case, Zhou Xiaoxuan, appeared to be emotional as she headed in. Dozens of uniformed police and plainclothes security personnel were guarding the site. Zhou told supporters this could be her last time in court in her lawsuit against a prominent state TV host. She did not elaborate further.
Lastly, I want to say it doesn't matter whether this journey has been pleasant or painful. I'm very honored that you're all here and have been here with me.
In a series of social media posts in 2018, Zhou accused television personality Zhu Jun of groping and forcibly kissing her when she was an intern 4 years earlier. Her accusations quickly went viral and she sued Zhu for damages 3 years ago. But the first hearing of the case was not held until December 2020, also behind closed doors. It was unclear if Zhu was present in the court on Tuesday. A lawyer for Zhu could not immediately be reached. Fei is one of Zhou's supporters outside the court.
So women are still being hunted down, are still prey. The women's rights has not been as well established in China as in Western countries.
China's metoo movement took off in 2018 when a college student in Beijing publicly accused her professor of sexual harassment. It spread to NGOs, media, and other industries. Discussion of metoo was then stifled. But recent extensive coverage in China has largely been without any obvious censorship. Sexual assault scandals involving tech giant Alibaba and celebrity Chris Wu have also rekindled the topic.
In its judgment, the Beijing court said the submitted evidence was insufficient to prove sexual harassment, marking a decision that could deal a major blow to China's metoo movement. 9 Hong Kong pro-democracy activists received sentences on Wednesday. They've been given between 6 and 10 months in jail for participating in what authorities have deemed an unauthorized assembly last year. That event was a memorial vigil for the victims of China's 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre. That's when the Chinese military violently suppressed unarmed students who had gathered to ask for democracy and uncensored access to education. The British Broadcasting Corporation estimates the death toll at around 10,000. City police banned the last 2 Tiananmen vigils, citing pandemic restrictions. Many activists see the ban as an attempt to shut down displays of defiance towards Beijing after Hong Kong's mass pro-democracy protests in 2019. Despite the ban, thousands turned up to light candles across the city last year, and smaller crowds did the same this year. On top of the 9 activists sentenced, 3 others received suspended sentences. All 12 had pleaded guilty. House Republicans are asking Democrats to support an amendment to their $3.5 trillion budget package. They want to end reliance on China for rare earth minerals. At the same time, the Democrats' budget plan would increase corporate and income marginal tax rates.
China's new source for rare earth minerals is the Afghan Taliban. Republican Representative David McKinley says eliminating U.S. reliance on the Chinese and the Taliban for these minerals is a bipartisan issue. He said China previously threatened to cut off supplies of the rare earth elements to the United States in 2019, and Congress should never let the United States be vulnerable like that again. The DoD identified $1 trillion worth of mineral deposits in Afghanistan in 2010, and now there's estimated to be $3 trillion. The department called Afghanistan the Saudi Arabia of lithium. Lithium is a key ingredient in making batteries and electric vehicles, grid storage, and solar-powered wind turbines. And Democrats on the same committee, the House Energy and Commerce Committee, prevented Republicans from making amendments that will limit or eliminate the economic impact of natural gas taxes within Biden's massive spending package. Biden's Build Back Better spending program covers everything from drug pricing, charging stations for electric vehicles, so-called climate justice grants, expanding 911 emergency phone services, protecting consumer privacy to Medicare and Medicaid reforms, loan guarantees, and expanding existing programs. What's more, under the budget resolution, nearly 8 million illegal immigrants will be given amnesty. House Republicans say this would encourage more people to flood the southern border. Yet Chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Jerry Nadler, said the immigration provisions will help grow the economy and strengthen communities. He said this is possible because it provides a path to permanent residence, improves the green card process, and provides additional resources to help end community violence. To pay for the $3.5 trillion budget plan, Democrats would change the current flat rate corporations pay in taxes to a marginal one. Rates could get as high as 26.5% for the wealthiest businesses, and it would dramatically increase the marginal tax rates for individuals, capital gains, trusts, and estates. Democrat Representative Stephanie Murphy from Florida says she supports many of the measures, but she says she doesn't think they can afford to do everything. The bill's aim to increase taxes on corporations and the wealthy comes after Republicans under President Trump significantly cut these rates.
The Chinese ambassador to Britain has been banned from Parliament because Beijing imposed sanctions on lawmakers who highlighted alleged human rights abuses in the Xinjiang region. Here's NTD's Eddie Atkin with the details.
China's ambassador to the UK has been barred from Parliament. This is after lawmakers sanctioned by the Chinese regime expressed outrage over his scheduled visit. Zheng Ziguang had been due to speak at the event there on Wednesday, but he was banned after the speakers of both houses intervened. In March, the Chinese regime imposed sanctions on 9 British individuals in retaliation for UK sanctions against Chinese officials responsible for the alleged abuse of Uyghurs. But the all-party Parliamentary China Group still invited Zheng to its summer party on the Commons terrace overlooking the Thames. Among the sanctioned were 5 Tory MPs and 2 members of the House of Lords. Some of them wrote to the speakers in protest against the invitation. They said it would be unthinkable that the Chinese regime's representative in the UK is still apparently free to come to Westminster and to use facilities here as a mouthpiece for his regime. Speaker of the House of Commons, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, said, "I do not feel it's appropriate for the ambassador for China to meet on the Commons estate, an indoor place of work, when his country has imposed sanctions against some of our members." Former Tory leader Sir Ian Duncan Smith and some of his sanctioned colleagues thanked the speakers for their strong principled stand. They said allowing the diplomat onto the estate would have been an insult to Parliament. But Richard Graham, the Conservative MP who chairs the group on China, expressed his regret that he would have to postpone the talk. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
Now we turn to viewer questions. A viewer recently asked in the comments section why Beijing is cracking down on its own country's companies. There have been many explanations offered. One possibility is that these companies are getting too big, and Beijing is nervous about these tech firms' increasing power. Large companies have a huge influence on consumer behavior and the economy, and on rare occasions, even public policy. They also have enormous amounts of data on users, infrastructure, and transportation. This is the case with some Western companies like Google, Facebook, and Amazon. Beijing may not want companies to have this kind of power in China because it may not necessarily be used to serve the regime's goals. Another reason could be that Beijing is concerned about Chinese companies' data falling into foreign countries' hands. This could have been the case with the crackdown on Chinese ride-hailing firm Didi. Didi has a huge archive of potentially sensitive data, like infrastructure and real-time locations of large numbers of Chinese citizens. Chinese authorities may have been afraid that this data could go to U.S. regulators in the process of the company going public in the U.S. And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching, and see you tomorrow.